It was never a decision for me or a question as to whether or not I would stand with your country. In fact, I must have been incredibly naive in that I had no idea the kind of hate that we've seen over the last 19, 20 months existed. People used to say to me in Sydney, I had the most incredible dad and he passed away about 10 months before October 7, and people would stop me in the streets and say, your dad was such an incredible ally of our Australian Jewish population of Israel. And I would think, oh, that's so lovely, and I would thank them, but I would wander off and wonder why you needed allies. I would think I knew of the past, I knew of the Holocaust and how horrific it was, but I had absolutely no idea what existed under the surface. And I think for me, after October 7, what happened on the day changed my life forever, and not so much the events of that day. I've seen terror, I've seen Al-Qaeda or ISIS. Dad was in Iraq for a year and fought both of those horrific terrorist organisations. What terrified me and what I guess changed me was the reaction of the world, was me sitting in Sydney, Australia, and looking at people in my country outside a building that is famous around the world and represents all that is wonderful and good about Australia. And I looked at Australians celebrating and cheering and chanting. Before an IDF boot had hit the ground, I watched people in my own country celebrate a terrorist massacre. And for me, that was terrifying. So I went on my show and I spoke, and I did not think for a second it would be controversial. I did not think for a second it would put me in the minority. But here we are. I'd love to just tell you a tiny little bit about my dad, because he is the reason that I'm standing here today. He is the reason that I have any courage. And I say again, he was a Major General in the Army, so all of you here who have served, who have put your life on the line, who would be willing to give your life in service of your country, there is no higher honour in my book. There is no greater act of service, and I thank you for your service, not just on behalf of Israel, because I don't speak for Israel, but on behalf of the Western world, who should be thanking you all daily for the fight that you are engaged in now. I thank you very genuinely. Dad was incredible. He went to Iraq. He was an Australian general at the time, and General Petraeus, the American general, identified him about 2 weeks in and said, we need this bloke to run the war. And he wrote a book afterwards. Dad didn't suffer from a lack of confidence. He called it Running the War in Iraq. So he was not shy in telling people his story, which I loved. He did that for a year, and he saw evil on so many levels. And one thing he did after that was go to Israel and investigate one of the conflicts, because that's, of course, what we do to our allies. We send in generals to investigate. And the quote that he had afterwards was, they put us to shame in how they conduct war when it comes to civilian minimisation of casualties. And that's something I wasn't aware of until well after I'd started to speak out. He's the most individually voted for politician in Australian history, and he stood for what was right, even when it was incredibly difficult on so many occasions. He taught me that it doesn't matter, even if it feels like the entire world is against you. If you know within yourself that you are standing for what is good and right, then you do it. And he did that day in, day out. When he came back from Iraq, there was a protest at a Sydney university. I know it's bizarre to even imagine that students at a university could be so stupid to protest against, someone defending their rights and their freedom and their democracy, but they did. And I was very upset as a young person, and I said, Dad, I feel my heart's breaking for you. They're calling you a war criminal. And the next day I walked into his office and he had one of the placards that they were marching with laminated, stuck to his wall, and he said, it's a badge of honour. He said, if these idiots are protesting against me, then I'm doing something right. And that comforts me a lot when I see some of the things that get sent to me daily. It is utterly ridiculous that you should have to thank me or acknowledge me for telling the truth and for standing with the victims of horrific terrorist atrocities, but it is an immense honour. It is such a privilege to stand with your people, and I do it selfishly as well because I understand what is at stake. I understand what the threat is, and I understand who it will impact. I understand that this is not just Israel, Hamas. This is an ideology that is already in my country, that is in Europe, that it is in America, that is in the UK, that is all over the world that will destroy the life I want for my daughter, not in 5 years, not in 10 years, now. So I fight on behalf of all of us who care about life and freedom and hope and want to preserve the values of Western civilization. And I will fight for you until the day I die, and it's such a privilege. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for giving me this honour. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Just one, I just wanted to share something very quickly before I go, and I carry it with me everywhere, but it's in my hotel room. I feel like it must be jet lag, or I don't know what it is, but this little Israeli flag that someone gave to me on my first trip to Israel last December. This young soldier came running up to me when I was doing some photos of people outside an event, and he said, I couldn't get a ticket, but I drove hours to come and see you. I wanted to give you this flag, and it was a flag from his uniform that he was wearing, his IDF uniform on October 7. And he said, I lost my best mates that day, sent into Gaza, and he said, the thing is, it's really scary going into war. It's hard enough, but he said a couple of days in we realised that all of a sudden the world had determined we were the bad guys, and he said that was debilitating. It was soul-destroying to think that not only are we risking our lives, but the world is painting us as the aggressors, as evil. And he said, my mum sent me a link to one of your clips about a week or two into my period in Gaza, and he said it was the first time that we didn't feel alone, that we thought the rest of the world, someone apart from us, understood. He said, and every week from then on, I gathered my soldiers around and we watched, and I share that with you not to big note myself in any way, shape or form, but as a daughter of a Major General, as a daughter of a soldier who was willing to give his life for his country, the thought that something that I say or do makes the existence of someone else in the military just a tiny bit easier is such a privilege and an honour, so thank you. I also acknowledge very readily that I should not be given a doctorate for telling the truth. It's a crazy world we are in. I feel incredibly unworthy when I look at those who stood beside me today up on stage, and I look at those who have served their nation with such bravery and courage, who have been so incredibly generous, who have invested so heavily in this country and its future, and I have so much respect for them. And I would first of all like to ask you to give them another round of applause, because they are just incredible human beings.